Thank you all for being here this evening. For those who may not know me, my name is Stephanie Watkins. I'm the Economic Development Director for the county. And I'm also the project manager for the Brownfields grant program. First, let me say we're excited to share with you information about the Walker County Brownfields program and how we can all work together to make our community an even better place to live, work, and play. This is a team effort. It takes participation from the entire community to ensure this program is a success. Speaking of team, I'd like to say a special thank you to our partners, the cities of Chickamauga, Lafayette, and Rossville, and those who have been boots on the ground working along beside me, Evett Parrish, Clay Tracy, Elizabeth Wells, who was instrumental in the application process, which led to the receipt of the grant from EPA. And thank you, Joe Legee, for helping with all the PR, and Walker Chamber for your support as well. As I say thanks to those who have been a part of this exciting opportunity thus far, I may forget to mention someone, so please forgive me in advance for that. We, of course, could not do this without our state leaders, recently retired Senator Jeff Mullis, newly elected Senator Colton Moore, Representatives Mike Cameron and Steve Tarvin, and our local leaders, Mayors Andy Arnold, Randall Dalton, Teddy Harris, our city managers such as David Hamilton, and each and every council member. We could not do it without you all. Thank you, Chairman Whitfield, and our commissioners Askew, Blake Moore, Commissioner Hart, and Commissioner Stoltz. Thank you for even being here this evening. Your dedication to Walker County and its positive economic growth is very important, and we appreciate this commitment to this program and look forward to working as we move forward. On that note, I'd like to invite Chairman Whitfield to say a few words, please.
Oh, sorry about that. Hey, good evening. It's good to be here with everyone tonight. Good to see a good crowd. And as we get started, I do want to recognize some of our elected officials that are here. I know Stephanie kind of mentioned some names, but so those of you in the audience will know who's here that you can talk to. So we have our District Commissioner, Brian Hart, here's with us. So Brian, throw your hand. That's Brian Hart, works with us on our District Commission level at our board. And then also Robert Stoltz is here with us on the front row. And then next to him is Senator Jeff Mullis. And then we have Mayor Teddy Harris. Teddy, raise your hand. And then I saw Evett Parrish, City Council of Chickamauga. There's Evett in the back standing up. Did I miss any other elected officials? I appreciate y'all being here because as Stephanie indicated, this is a collaborative grant that we've got. And so it takes everybody working together to be able to do this. One of the things that when we started down this journey a couple of years ago, one thing that I wanted the answer to was this real? Is this really something that's available that we can tap into as a local community? Or where's the got you moment? Or are they going to come up and it's going to be, oh, we're here from the federal EPA and oh, we didn't know this or we didn't tell you this or those type, possible horror stories. Stephanie and I was able to go to Atlanta back several months ago and participate in a Brownfields training summit that they had. And one of the great things about that, there was people there from all over the Southeast, from different states that come to that meeting to talk about their experiences with Brownfield programs with the federal EPA and working with their local jurisdictions as well to be able to facilitate these programs. And what was neat to see is many of them were 5, 10, 12, 15 years into their program. And so this is step one. The assessments are step one. And we got grant funding that will pay for 100% site assessments within our community. And our goal is to maybe be able to do as many as 30 that you'll hear more about tonight. But then the next phase is how do we take those assessments, go back for additional funding to work toward cleanup. And so that's ultimately where we saw other communities have gotten to. It's not that the federal EPA wants to invest $500,000 into our community and walk away. They want to invest $500,000 and then come back and help us implement the cleanups that are needed in the community. And so they get value from that initial seed investment. A big part of that is local engagement, community involvement. So having a group here like this size, this many people of you being able to show up, shows great community engagement and support for this program. And so as we continue to have these meetings and updates, this won't be the last one. There will be more to come. And as we start getting further into the program, we'll actually come and, show you some of the results of properties that we are working with and, possible outcomes and things as time goes on. Because we want to be able to come in and show you sites that were brownfields and be able to come up here in the near future, a year or two down the road, and say, now here's what it looks like after it's been cleaned up, revitalized, and here's how we got there. So this is not a 50-yard dash. It's not a sprint. This is a marathon. Okay, so it's going to take time. From what you're going to hear and see tonight is basically summarizing what's been going on behind the scenes for about 2 years. So there's a lot of work and energy that has gone into this. These grants are very competitive, and so it's a real honor that Walker County, along with its partners, were able to get this grant at all. Because it comes down to tenths of a point in scoring when they score these grants. The cleanup grants will also be competitive. And one of the things that they tell us, again, they can't emphasize enough, is community engagement and involvement and buy-in to these type projects are very, very critical in moving communities forward into those next phases of cleanup. So thank you again for being here. Once they give their presentation, we'll be here to answer any additional questions. But share this information with your neighbors. There will be additional brochures back there. It has Stephanie's contact information on it. She's been amazing as our project manager on this, and she's here for the long haul, so we do appreciate everything Stephanie's done for us. And again, thank y'all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As I mentioned, we were awarded the assessment grant from EPA, and I would be remiss if I did not send out a very special thank you to our EPA project officer, Olga Perry. I'd also like to thank our state EPD representative, Shannon Ridley, who along with Olga has been very helpful as we started this project. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to our consultants with Terracon, Amanda Harrett and Dallas Whitmill, for them to give us an overview of brownfields and opportunities we have here in Walker County to help protect the environment, revitalize our community, and help our cities and county grow and be prosperous. So, Amanda, if you want to take the stage. Sorry about that. Sorry, guys. Keep hitting that mic. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name is Amanda Harrett. I'm an environmental scientist with Terracon, and I work for our Chattanooga office, and I work with Brownfield programs throughout the state of Georgia and in Tennessee. And I'm also here tonight with Dallas Whitmill, and he is our department manager and works in our Chattanooga office and also oversees all of these brownfield projects. So he'll be here to answer questions, and he's going to let me do the hard part and talk about it. So, but thank you so much for having us tonight. To me, this is like one of the biggest steps. You're here, and this is awesome to see so many people here to support this grant. We've been so lucky to be part of this process and working with great partners. These brownfield grants, it's not one person or just a couple of people. It takes a whole county, village perspective to get these done. And it's really exciting because even though they are as an EPA project, these are really redevelopment and revitalization tools for your community. And I'm very passionate about seeing these projects in Georgia. I'm a Georgia resident too. I went to UGA, grew up in 4-H in Georgia, And I'm really excited to be part of this opportunity, and this is a great one. Dallas and I have been talking about this community for a long time, about it's just sitting here waiting for all this to happen, so I'm really excited to be part of it. So thank you for that opportunity. To tell you a little bit about where we're coming from, we work with clients all over the country doing these projects for Brownfield grants. So I work with Dallas and Chattanooga, and then we also have our national partners, Belinda and Becky, and they also assist us through this process. Just a little blurb about the company. We're located all across the country, but what's really important to Terracon is having a local base. We're local people that are working in our communities and helping our communities. So that's really important to us. So through this process, I hope that you can, if you find something that you don't understand or you want to know more about, feel free to come up to the mic and ask questions, because I would like for this to be as interactive as possible. If you'd rather just sit back, that's fine too, but feel free to stop me at any point, because I want people to really understand this process. So to tell you a little bit about the assessment grant, so there's several different grants that EPA awards, but this one is assessment. It's a $500,000 grant. It can be for hazardous substances and petroleum. The tasks that they'll be working on through this process, community outreach, which we've already said is very important. We're going to be assisting with site identification. These are brownfield sites that are in need of redevelopment. As part of this process, we also do site assessment, which is phase 1 and phase 2. We'll go into that in a little bit. And there's also reuse and redevelopment, remediation planning processes. And the last is just the reporting that we have to do back to EPA. So that one's not too exciting. So probably one of the biggest questions everybody asks is, well, what is a brownfield? You see them every day. A brownfield is going to be property that has perceived contamination. So that's the biggest part of the definition that EPA uses. So it's going to be the old dry cleaner that's been sitting there on the corner for many, many years, old abandoned gas stations. It could be a factory, which I know that you have a few of those in Walker County, but it can be smaller sites too. So one of the sites that I worked on in the community did look like this field on the side, and we found out later that it was an illegal dump that was about 60 feet deep in waste that people had dumped in there over the years, and then they just covered it over and you would never know. So these are type of the properties that we're looking for, and we'll be asking for you to provide input on that to this process. So these would be examples: vacant properties, abandoned properties, your dry cleaners, your gas stations, landfills, dumping sites, industrial properties, junkyards, mine scarred and rail yards and adjacent facilities. So there's two different basic types when you're talking about brownfield programs. There's going to be your state program and your federal program. So what your state program does, and we'll go into that in a little bit, but basically it's a way to work through some of the potential liability issues associated with brownfield properties, and there's also some financial incentives as well. The federal program is looking at doing assessment and cleanup, and there's also job training grants, but what we focus on is the assessment and cleanup. In the picture, this is a site that was actually in Tallahassee. That's a before and after redevelopment site. So these are the type of grants that are available that your community has the opportunity to go after. Assessment grant is what they're going to be working on. Site specific, so if you had one site that you knew was going to be very expensive to assess, that would be a site specific. A cleanup grant, that's where you're actually going to be looking at removing the contaminants that are at the site and getting it ready for reuse. A multi-purpose, it's really simple. It just means that it could be assessment and cleanup in the same grant. And then revolving loan fund grant. Chattanooga is actually a good example of a revolving loan fund grant community. Basically, it's a way that you can get either low interest loans, or you can I also do non-profit to grants And that's a way that the community can keep pushing money out into the community to redevelop sites. So we talked about this a little bit, about what this assessment grant is going to cover. The first thing is we're looking at community engagement. So we, as part of this grant, we worked with Walker County, and they developed a list of stakeholders that would be working with the community. Then there'll be outreach meetings like this. This is basically kind of what we call our Brownfield 101, just kind of some basic information. But there's potential other opportunities for engagement and outreach to the process. We work through a site inventory, and that's one thing we would be asking the community to assist with, and that's identifying potential sites that you would like to see go through this process. The phase 1 and phase 2 site assessments that we'll talk about a little more. There's some documents that we have to prepare as far as this. Basically, there are generic and site-specific sampling plans that we have to prepare. They're called QAPs, or Quality Assurance Plans. We also have to, when we get to a site to a part that it's ready to go to the cleanup process, we can complete what's called an ABCA, or Analysis of Brownfield Cleanup Alternatives. So these are things that can be included under these grants. In the pictures here, I don't know how well you can see it from where you are, but this was actually one of the sites that we worked on in South Carolina. It's called Pickens Doodle Park. I had to say that fast. But basically, it was an old, had a UST as the site, had contamination. They worked to leverage $1.7 million to redevelop this park, and that was a multitude of different grants that they worked on. But it's just a good example of what a community, if a community is set on doing something and making it into something really nice. This also connects to their community walk. And so they have, I can't remember how many miles it was, but there's several miles that you can bike and walk, and this park is at one of the ends of that. So it's a really neat setup. So one of the big things that this grant would look at is looking at doing your environmental due diligence. And this is important because if you buy a property without doing environmental due diligence, you are basically accepting the liability of anything that's there. So the way that we work through this environmental due diligence is by producing an environmental site assessment, a phase 1, that evaluates, basically it looks at the history of the site, what's there presently, and how the sites around it affected. Is looking at potential environmental recognized conditions, or recognized environmental conditions. And what this does is it helps you understand what you're walking into as far as purchasing a property, but it also provides you liability protection as well. So as I was talking about the phase 1, first we do a site visit to the property, and we make notes of what's on the site and what may have previously been on the site. We do interviews. We look at environmental records that would be available through the state and other databases. And we try to basically recreate the history of the site. And some of the sites in this county and also in the Chattanooga area goes way back to the turn of the century. Sometimes we have really good data. But it's a little bit of an investigative mystery trying to figure out sometimes what had been at these sites. We use that information if we do identify potential contamination, certain recognized environmental conditions or RECs would be things like underground storage tanks. So we would identify that there's a potential for there could have been a petroleum leak at the site, and what if we want to go and collect samples around that site. So when we get into the sampling part of assessments, that's called the phase 2 environmental site assessment. And so based on what we think could potentially be on the site, we identify where the samples would be collected and what they would be tested for. So basically we're looking to see kind of a presence, absence, if there would be something potentially at the site. So if we have a facility that we went through the phase 1 process, we went through the phase 2 process, then we would get to our cleanup and reuse planning phase. And basically what this is we're using the data that was collected, the history and the sample findings, and we're putting that into a document that basically is a remediation plan. And it also looks at cost to determine potentially what type of remediation would be the least costly, and making sure that that site goes through redevelopment. So this is the more interesting part. Why is this so important? So I kind of gave you all the technical part and why we need to do this, but why is this so important? This is so important to our communities because otherwise we have properties, prime properties, that are sitting there being unused. You know, you're not getting your tax money out of it like you should. Potential jobs there. You're losing the potential for jobs coming out of that redevelopment, increasing your local tax base. Brownfield properties are typically where you want to be. Sometimes they're waterfront, sometimes they're all and rail, but usually they're like on a main highway. There's a reason why they put that factory there, that gas station there. It's a prime location. And so typically it has infrastructure that's already going to it. So it makes sense that would be a good redevelopment property. This also promotes partnerships within our communities because it takes everybody together to work towards these projects getting done. And another thing one of the reasons why EPA is really interested in it is that it helps it protect the environment and helps limit potential contact with contaminants as far as redeveloping these sites. It helps strengthen your marketplace and it promotes sustainable redevelopment. And these are all meeting the needs of your community to help build a stronger, more cohesive working community. So how do you, if you had a property or if you had an interest in getting involved, how you participate in this process? We would be working directly with Stephanie on this project as a project manager. So there is a flyer that you can fill out. So if you have a property that you would be interested in getting assessed, basically the way this works to the grant is it uses the grant funding. So it is not going to be at any cost to the either a prospective purchaser or the owner. Sometimes people like to use it as like kind of a marketing way of marketing the property, saying they had a phase 1 and phase 2 completed on the property, so they kind of know what's there and they can plan. Sometimes we're working with prospective purchasers, so they want to have this done before they purchase the property and go through their environmental due diligence. And these are tasks that would be covered through grant funding. So if you're interested in getting involved in the process as far as having a property, you would fill out this form, and this is something that Stephanie would review and evaluate with her team. So this slide talks a little bit about the Georgia Brownfield program. So as I was saying before, typically what a state program is assisting you with is helping to limit your liability. So through this, it's a program, but it's also going to be a legal agreement with the state that it helps protect you if anybody try to come third-party claims, or if maybe regulations changed later and you were okay now, but you're not in the future. But it's also transferable. So if you worked through the Brownfield program, it helps freeze your tax for 10 years. So basically anything that you're working on, let's say that you had to do additional assessment beyond this grant, or if you had money invested in cleaning up the site, those would all count towards working against your taxes for 10 years. The other thing that we see that's a benefit to the communities through these grants is they help to leverage other grants. So as I was saying, with the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is a few success stories with other communities. But what we typically see with a community that's so engaged like you are is there's not just one Brownfield grant. We like to call it a Brownfield program. So there's multiple Brownfield grants that they're going after. But what we also see is there's a lot of complementary grants that they go after that helps through this redevelopment process. So they're looking at historic tax credits and other government agencies. They're working through those grants. So it takes all of this working together to make it work for the community. I'm actually going to talk about Columbus first. So this is one of our more recent Brownfield communities that we've been working with. I've been working with them since 2016. And I was lucky enough that when I came in to work with them, they had already started building their kind of collection of grants to help redevelop their sites. So we worked with them to go after a EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant, which they won in fiscal year 2017. And they also we're finishing up a cleanup grant with them that they won in 2019. But they also had multiple other grants that we're working for with this community. So the area that we were working on, at the time it was called the Second Avenue Corridor, and it was basically, I'm sure a lot of you have been to Columbus, but it was basically the entry to the city, and it went through one of the most depressed and poverty-stricken neighborhoods in the community. And originally it was part of Bibb City, which you may know of. They were one of the biggest textile mills at one time. And so this whole community was just mills along the fall line, and it was mill houses, and it was a wonderful community. I remember as a kid driving through there, and they had their own schools, their own community centers. I mean, it was its own community. But in the 90s, like we saw in many areas across the South, they lost a lot of those businesses and they closed. And so the community was interested in redeveloping this area because it's right beside their downtown, and nobody was wanting to live there. It was very depressed. So they worked on multiple grants. They had a roadside beautification grant from GDOT. They had their home grant from HUD, community development block grant. They had some smaller grants from like Georgia Organics, where they have a urban garden there. And they also had a targeted Brownfield assessment grant, which was for a specific site. So there was all these different things, and since then, I need to update this slide because I even have more grants that I've gotten since then. It's become a purpose-built community. So now it's called the Mill District. And the reason I want to tell you it's a success story is just from the time that we started working with them in 2016 till now, every time I go down there, there's a new building that's been redeveloped, a new building that's been built, and they're just really growing and changing quick. But what a purpose-built, just to tell you real quick what that is, basically it's looking at helping the community from birth all the way to college. So they provide support through that whole process. So the building that's right here is called Mill Village. It was formerly the Chase Homes housing development, and it was, if not the oldest, it was one of the oldest ones in the country. So it was in definite need of repair or demolish because it was in such bad shape. So what they had done at this area is, because the community has such a need for affordable housing, it is part of the Housing Authority of Columbus, but it has multi-priced units in it. So it's looking at the equity as far as having more housing units. The other thing that's really interesting is the Medical College of Georgia built a facility like the next block over. So one of the things they did to help this area is actually put a health clinic that's in the facility, so that anybody that lives there has, they can just walk out their door and go to the health facility. The other thing the Mill District has done is they actually they have a sliding scale health facility within the community that anybody can go to. I've been to myself as well. So if you can pay, that's great. If you can't pay, they'll still serve you. It's one of those places. They also work to provide food for the community. And so one of the programs they've been working through is providing meals based on medical needs, basically prescribing meals. So there's a lot of things that they're doing. The other thing was with their elementary school, they have put a health facility inside the school too to help this community. So they're looking at all these ways to help support and redevelop looking at both the equity portion and making it better for everybody in the community. So then we'll talk about Chattanooga. So I've worked with the city of Chattanooga on the Brownfield program since 2007. And as you know, by living very close to Chattanooga, they've had these grants and been very successful. And so the grants that they've had the assessment grants, they've had cleanup grants, they also have the revolving loan fund, which has been very successful. They've had Brownfield training grants, and also what's very important is the private funding as well. And I'm sure Dallas will add, because he knows so much of the history as well with Chattanooga. But what we've seen in Chattanooga is you have a cornerstone of the area that you do your assessment on, and then from that, you just kind of see this ripple effect of redevelopment. And this Burnside facility, this was not one of our Brownfield properties as far as being within the grant, but it is still a Brownfield property that we've worked on. But I see this as being one of those examples of this happens in a ripple effect, that you start working in some of these really depressed areas of need, and then from that, it just keeps on growing and prospering. So this, just a recent example, I think they took these pictures in the past week. So it's just a recent example of what's changing and helping with redevelopment and supporting the community. So this is my last slide, but I think it's the most important one. How do you get involved in the process? Well, first of all, you come to meetings like this and you learn about the process. And I think one of the biggest benefits of coming and being part of this is just this, word of mouth. When people ask about it and what's going on, tell them all the positive things that can happen from these grants. So it's very important. The other thing that I'm sure Stephanie will follow up with as well is, how do you stay involved? If there's an email list, I know there's the Walker County website and the Walker County Facebook page to be pushing out. And of course, we're here to answer questions if anybody has any questions, but that's it. Thank you for listening.
We're going to stay seated here, if that's okay, and let you guys ask questions if you want. You can ask them of us or of Amanda and Dallas here. Is there, you want to know more information, we do have brochures back there to tell a little bit more about it. We do have the site application, so if you do have a site or a property and you're interested, please fill that out. All my contact information is back there. My cards and, like I said, contact information is on the brochure and the site application.
Are there any questions that anybody has you'd like to come up and ask? Everybody, if you'd like to come up to the microphones, everybody can hear you right here in the center. Come on up here, sir.
She said you can withdraw from the program at any phase. And what is the process for that?
So basically, when I was talking about before how you get involved, so you can submit information about your site and we can have conversations. That information is private until we get to the part where we start producing reports. The reports that we do as part of this grant are public information because we have to provide them to EPA, for review. But as far as if any point in time you want to stop, you would just notify us.
How?
Via email or phone call?
Just email me, call me. You have to say.
There's no forms to be filled out or anything like that. No forms to be filled out to withdraw from the program.
Right, no.
No.
But the biggest thing I would want you to be aware is once we produce a report, then that report would be public information. But just to sit down and talk about it and, if you have questions or concerns, that would be private.
And is Terracon a private entity? And how much money they make out of these grants?
So we complete phase one environmental site assessments, phase two environmental site assessments, brownfield work even for private developers outside of the grant process. And so the money we make off of this is very similar to doing that same work for a private client versus doing it through this EPA grant. It's all the same type of work that we do either way.
So you get the money out of the grants
We get paid for the work that we do based
by,
on the hours that we put into the project,
by who?
by the grant.
Yeah,
By the grant.
the phase one assessments, and then if the project qualifies for a phase two assessment, 100% of their services for those two are paid 100% through the grant. There's no out-of-pocket from the property owner. And so that's one of the great things about this grant opportunity for our community is we're looking for additional sites to do assessments. We've already started on a couple, but we hope to be able to do maybe as many as 30 sites
In Walker County.
in Walker County. And if we have more than that, we'll go back and ask for more money. And
And then-
hopefully, if there's opportunity and people that are willing to participate, we'll go back and ask for more. So this is just to get us started in the initial phase of that. But we're not asking anything other than what's on that one-page document back there. So those are in the back of the room there that you can see the information that's being requested, which also includes access to the property. So whoever currently owns the property has to give us written permission for the engineers to be on the property to do the assessments. And so that sounds maybe simplistic, but sometimes maybe you are a potential buyer of a piece of property and you have a great interest, but you want to have an environmental assessment done first. Well, we've got to get the property owner to agree to let these folks onto the property to do.
So it's in the interest of the seller too then?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly, because many of you, I know in the room here tonight, are in the real estate business or real estate, and you a lot of times want to know what's on the property so you have a game plan or
Yes.
have an idea financially what you're going to be looking at to clean that up. So many of you out there tonight know that these phase one and phase two assessments can be several thousands of dollars to get that information. Here's an opportunity to apply to possibly get that where it doesn't cost you anything if your application is accepted into the program.
And this $500,000, the number I saw, that's for Walker County?
Yes,
Or?
that's 100% for Walker County total. And the training we went through, one of the things that they stress heavily, they don't want the money back. They want us to be successful, and success is having properties to evaluate. The worst thing that can happen to us is to get to the end of this program in 3 years, I think it is, 3, 4 years? 4 years. We just want to get it done in 3 years. That's where I was thinking. We've talked about we want to do it in 3 years and outperform the requirements. But the last thing we want to do is get into that 4 years and have $250,000 left over. We want to use it. We want to invest it into the community. And so that's why we need property owners or potential property owners to come forward and help us invest this money into the community.
I have last question. Go to phase 3, and if the tanks or whatever is removed, the responsibility after that becomes owners. So owner have to spend the money to get the pollutant out or whatever it is.
Yes, typically, if you've identified a property, you've had phase 2 done, and say, as you indicate, that tanks need to be removed and maybe some soil cleanup. That's where we hope to be in a position in the near future to be able to go and apply for cleanup grants as well. But if there's a property owner that needs to move quicker, or they need to do something in weeks or months and not a year type scenario, because this is a slow process to get the funding for cleanups, then you would have to pay that money out of pocket to do the cleanup. But if
Yeah.
someone has the ability to be patient and has time on their side, then we go after funding for cleanup. But again, it's a marathon to get the cleanup money as well. And then in many of those cases, there is some match by the local owner that would have to be put in on the project for cleanup because the federal cleanup money is normally not the full amount.
Thank you very much.
The other thing that we've noticed is a lot of times, what happens is you do the phase one and you do the phase two, and then you've got developers that are wanting to come in and develop that property, and frequently, they do not wait on the EPA funds to help with any cleanup, because at that point, they can quantify what their liabilities are. And to a developer, that's their big scare, is I don't know what my liabilities are, so I can't make this project work. This process helps quantify those liabilities, that then they can roll that into the project and understand if they can make it work, and frequently they can, because usually these properties are, underdeveloped and aren't the, the highest priced properties around. And so they roll that back into their process and they just take off and go with it. And that's one of the things that EPA likes so much about this program, is they'll put in some money into the program, and that, like we were talking about, that's seed money that leverages the private development, and EPA keeps track of that. And the amount of money that they put in versus the leveraged private funds that go in voluntarily on these projects is a very small portion. So it makes it very successful for EPA.
Great questions, thank you for those. Yes, ma'am, come up, please.
I'm trying to get the understanding
Sure.
of everything.
Sure.
Okay. This project, if there's a project or a place that needs cleaning up, the owner of that property has to okay for you all to come,
They have to
right?
get permission, yes.
Has to
that's
get
correct.
permission. Okay, now would the EPA be instrumental in helping to clean up some of these things by them going against the code? What if there's asbestos in this place? And we know that it is.
And that's very common, and that's one of the things that would be included, to do an assessment to determine how much asbestos, especially when you get into phase two and all, then they can also determine what that cost might be associated with cleaning that up. And so that's one reason it's community engagement, because some of you may know tonight, maybe you don't own a property that you think is a fit for this, but you're tired of that piece of property down the street from you looking the way that it does.
Yes, I
And so
am.
we need people to reach out to those property owners and say, hey, let me tell you what I've learned. This could help you. Please get involved. Please contact Stephanie and allow them to come in and do an assessment of your property. We want to clean up our community. And so that's where we get that community buy-in and that community working together, because it's not the big stick approach. We're not going to go in and make anybody do this or force them. We got to have willing partners.
And
That was
I
my question.
failed to mention that, like the commissioner was saying, we can take samples for lead-based paint and asbestos to help you identify if that's an
But they
issue.
have to okay for you to come on their property to take samples.
We have to have that access agreement for all.
You're
facilities.
talking 50, 60 years ago. I'm going to tell my age here in a minute, but that's okay. I went to school there. I know there's asbestos in that place, okay? And with it being in such disarray, all of these particles are coming out, and we have a lot of lung issues there in that community, along with other things that lay on the ground and produce mold and this and that, but we can't seem to get any help there. And I also, if it's my private property, if I wanted you to come and take samples of the soil and the water that's there, because I live down below, there used to be a landfill there. They had chemicals there, and back in the 50s, they didn't a liner. And when it rains, there's something that comes up. It looks like Stachybotrys. It dries, and then it flakes off.
Yeah, you would need.
I'll need a book.
Well, thank you. Great questions, very good. Who else? Anybody else? Yes, sir, come on up.
Tom Report at the Chattanooga Township. I have two questions. One is, you mentioned a few things about the similar program in Chattanooga, and I'm kind of curious about some of the details there. And then I guess I'll list the next one after that.
Yeah, so Chattanooga is a Brownfield program, which has involved multiple grants, multiple cleanup grants. They even have they've got the revolving loan fund grant, which has been very successful because private developers can access low interest loans to help clean up contamination issues on a property. They've even had nonprofits receive grants from that from that revolving loan fund program. And they've even had job training grants where they have used those to bring in people from underprivileged communities to train them how to do environmental work so that they can end up getting jobs. And they've had a very successful placement ratio for that as well.
And they just recently won an assessment and cleanup grant this past season.
Great. So this is the similar program, just a few steps down the line?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Same program.
Yeah, awesome. Can you give an example of a property that benefited from this program in Chattanooga?
So Chestnut Flats, a apartment complex in Chattanooga. They received funds through the revolving loan fund through the city of Chattanooga in order to be able to clean up environmental contaminants that were on that as part of their construction and redevelopment of that piece of property.
How does this relate to I know a couple properties in Walker County have been considered. We talked about one, the Coates building, was it, that we went to the fire at? And I'm just kind of curious about that piece of it, how local governments could get involved, and if there are any properties right now that you'd consider that are owned by Walker County that would be considered for the program.
Yeah, it is open to both private as well as government locations, and so those are also being looked at and considered within our local partnership with our cities and counties, so it's not restricted to just private-owned property. It can be publicly held property, city, county, or nonprofits as well.
Cool. Any properties in Walker County that y'all are considering for the program?
Looking at that is very possible.
Wait, which one?
I said it's very possible. We're looking at that.
Oh, you're
We
just,
wanted to see
nothing
what
specific.
type of response we get from people in the community that want to get involved first.
Then the government piece is next. Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Good question. Anyone else? Anybody? Okay, well, again, thank y'all for coming out tonight. And there are brochures there on the back and also the forms. So if you know someone that needs to fill one out, or you're going to try to encourage them to fill one out, as we heard earlier tonight, please take some of those forms. Stephanie's contact information is on there, and we'll be holding more of these in the future and be providing more information as this program matures, hopefully over the many, many years to come, as we can emulate what some of our neighboring communities have done, where you start this process and you keep it going, and this is just the start. So thank you for being here, and look forward to working with many of you going forward. Have a good night.
Thank you.